Field Minister Yates,
Oh yeah.
were your parents filling out a Mad Lib where they just needed
Oh,
two nouns when you were
yeah.
born?
Yeah. Yeah. So minister is the easy part. It's my mother's maiden name.
That's what Macon is for me, Field.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, is that okay? Yeah. There
Yeah.
you go.
It's Field Yates. He's a big star. We're happy to have him. Uh, what would you say it is you're doing, Field, having two kids under two? I comprehend how you're doing it,
Yeah.
but why are you doing it?
Great question. There was a time. So when we had our first daughter, who's almost 18 months now, I remember my wife and I having the conversation as we thought about what the rest of our family growth process might look like. And we both kind of settled on the idea that rather than have a child, go through all the things that come along with a newborn child, specifically the nighttime routine, which is as difficult as any night as any part of the day. Obviously, it's a battle every night just to get a few hours of actual restful sleep. And we said, wouldn't you rather just have like a really trying few years here as opposed to having a child, waiting some time, 4 or 5 years, whatever it might be. That child is no longer a child that requires like care to get to bed and things of that nature, and then restart the clock. And we settled on let's just knock it out all at once, or not literally all at once, but let's do our best to have children quickly, so that 5 or 7 years from now, when we are no longer having children and our whatever children we have are grown up a little bit, we will just laugh at those long nights when we slept for like 45 minutes consecutively, and we considered that a win.
Yeah, I don't know any different, but I had somebody say our kids are 4 years apart, but we were in diapers for 12 years.
Oh my
Like
gosh.
and then you can only hear, hey, from a doctor, it's a geriatric pregnancy, just so you guys know. You can only hear that so many times.
Yeah.
My lovely wife was 35, as was I, when we had our first, and now we are the ripe old age of 37 and
Mm.
expecting our third. We're
Yeah,
taping
congrats on
on.
that, by the
Thank
way.
you. Thank you.
I know you
Appreciate
guys have
that.
talked about it on the show before, but and I remember the announcements that you made on Chris's behalf about his family growing as
I
well,
did.
which was
I
cool.
did do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did do that. It's not all sunshine, Field. My 2.5-year-old daughter gave me a nickname a couple of weeks ago.
Mm.
And this is coming on the heels of my maybe putting on a couple of pounds, like belly region,
Yeah.
chin region.
Hmm.
And I don't know if that's at all related to the nickname, but I am now Dada Cow.
Ooh,
So
like
I'll
that.
walk in the door. Yeah. I'll say, hi, sweet girl. I love you so much. How was your day? And then she'll say, hello, Dada Cow, which
I'm
I don't
jealous.
know.
I,
I
I
guess
think it's
it's
a term of
motivating.
endearment. Yeah, it is. It is, but hopefully not humbling at the same time. I would love that if my older daughter we were at 18 months and 3 weeks. So
Congrats.
the 3 week old has some prodigious qualities. I don't think her like right now. I don't think it's her ability to speak. Um, but the 18-month old, her bag of tricks is like sort of limited, but she's been speaking a little bit for a few months now, and her favorite one is like she loves that when you ask her what a cow says. She's the best mooer in all of pretty much the entire population under the age of 2. So I
Yeah.
would love it if that evolved into me becoming dad cow, and we could just move back and forth at each other in perpetuity. That might work actually.
Yeah, I would start throwing in some moves, maybe mention that you have spoken with a Dada Cow
Hmm.
recently and that
Yeah, this could be
you
good.
think you might have what it takes. Are you going to see I don't mean to speak your personal business. Are you going to see the grandma who's a prolific real estate agent?
Haha, wow, you did some great research. Yes. But I would say this, and my mom has, like you, she's been in real estate for quite some time, and I'm so proud of the business that she has grown. And what's really been, but she is a better grandma than she is a real estate agent, which I think is saying a lot. I am not one to, sometimes it can be uncomfortable bragging about things that are close to you, but when it comes to your parents, it's hard not to feel that pride sometimes. And she is an absolutely A plus grandmother. And what I think one thing that I've realized since becoming a father is just how important that dynamic is in the early stages. Just because any help that you can get, you will take. My grandmother, or my mother, excuse me, who just turned 70, like she has more energy than my wife and I do sometimes to take care of these kids. And there's never any explanation, right? Which is almost always a thing, whether it's a babysitter, whether it's a grandparent, whether it's a friend who's coming over to aid and help you out. If my mom just woke up 3 hours before my wife and I did, which we never sleep that late, so I guess it's impossible. But if she was ever awake and had either of our daughters for 3 hours by herself, she would know exactly what to do. So it has been a massive, massive help to have her for the first 18 months of being parents. And it will be a bigger help having her when we have two children under her roof at the same time.
That's awesome. We were just at the beach. We had my parents and my two kids,
Yeah.
and there was nothing cooler than seeing the 2-year-old and then my 82-year-old dad just cracking each other up.
Yeah. It's the
It's
best.
like it's the best.
Yeah.
Why am I having these kids, Field? It's the vanity, I guess.
Of
What could
course.
be more vain than thinking, what does this world need more of? Me,
I mean,
this guy, a little bit more of me.
my Instagram stories have become far more prolific since becoming a
Yeah.
father, and they are exclusively tied to my daughter. I mean, if you don't think that was a significant consideration when we decided upon building a family, then you have really erred fairly gravely. You're absolutely right. Vanity is at least two-thirds of the equation for having a child.
That's Father of the Year, Field Yates. Let's turn it back about 20 years
Yeah.
to high schooler Field Yates. Uh, can you tell us what the mascot of the Belmont Hill School is?
Yeah, I believe we go by the sextants now, which
The
for those
Sexton.
unfamiliar with nautical terms, sextant, and I should know this, and I should know this perfectly, but a sextant, I believe, is a nautical tool for navigation, right? It helps you when you're on the waters trying to figure out exactly which way the ship should be steered, so to speak. But we never had a mascot. Oftentimes, if our school was written up in the paper, they'd said Hillies, which was never our actual mascot. So I always wanted to write into the editor and say that they have done us a great disservice. But the Belmont Hill Sextants was the actual mascot for our school.
The sextant is an instrument for determining the angle between the horizon and a celestial body, such as the sun, the moon, or a star. It is used in celestial navigation to determine latitude and longitude. Uh, Now, Field, I've been going back and forth on what's better, like a boom, 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 go sex, go, or like a boom, 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 let's go sex. What did the school use to cheer on their very good football and lacrosse teams? Maybe a better question is, what did the opposing schools say to you guys?
God, you know what? I can't recall. I think we used "Let's Go Hill" more often than we did "Let's Go Sex." Um, my favorite, and this is 100% outing me, is like a guy who comes from super preppy, nerdy school. But listen, you're familiar with some of that in the
Man,
Charlottesville area. I believe, and I'm like some of my memory is fading. I'm 36, so I've more than half my life, or almost more than maybe almost exactly half my life has been spent as a high school graduate, as opposed to not having yet graduated high school. But there was a basketball game where I recall us being up big on an opponent in our league, and the typical scoreboard chant came up when the opponent who was down by let's say 20 points did something flashy for attention or celebrated like a made shot with like 4 minutes to go down by 20 points. And we did the whole scoreboard chant on our sideline, and they returned the favor with board scores, a reference, of course, to the standard aptitude test to help you get into college. If I've
right.
Nothing has ever been nerdier in the history of sports competition, but that is a part of my history.
It's all right. It's okay. You're gonna work for us someday.
There it
You
is.
know.
Yep.
Yeah. That might be more of a UVA thing than my prep school, but none of it's great.
Yeah. Not ideal.
Field, I think I've really settled in from the whole commute to work. Are you ready to start?
Let's do it. Born ready.
Okay. Uh, it's a little joke. It's a podcasting joke. The huge neck picture, Field, it made the rounds again yesterday.
Happens often. Yeah.
One of my favorite pictures. It makes you look like Teddy Bruschi's large adult son in my mind. The internet has you at some point in your life 5'11", 200
Yeah.
pounds. Are those current measurables or are those Wesleyan measurables?
Those are Wesleyan measurables. I recently had to take a physical. It was right before our second daughter was born. I had my annual physical. The 5'11" part is intact. I believe I was 174 pounds during the physical. So
Wow.
we've trimmed down, which was, you think about the contributing factors to a much more narrow figure. And first of all, college affords you a certain lifestyle of being very beverage heavy for what, 3, 4, 5 nights a week, depending on how much of a party animal you are. And you know me, a little bit of a party animal inside of me. And then also, like, there was a time in my life where, like, if you told me to run 2 miles, I'd be like, I don't know that I'm physically capable of doing that. Like, and once I got into weightlifting, look at how macho we are talking about weightlifting. I just, like, it just, that seemed like it was the thing that you were supposed to do. And I was so concerned about gains, less concerned about being like twitchy and having great cardio endurance. So I got puffy for a handful of years there. But that photo was probably worth it.
There's no doubt about it. Like most high schoolers, I guess, you bridged your high school and college years with a 4-summer gig working for the New England Patriots.
Yeah.
Quote, Yates said his gig with the Patriots resulted from simply being in the right place at the right time. I was picked out of the crowd to serve as a ball boy during one of their rookie minicamps. I guess my question is, what is the actual story?
Yeah, I was going to say, that's the very Cliff Notes version. So back in, I want to say my freshman or sophomore year of high school, there was someone that I knew that knew a member of the Patriots organization, and there was a Patriots rookie minicamp, which we still have in the NFL to these days. It's to much more fanfare these days than it was back in 2000, whatever it was, call it 2000, maybe a little bit later than that. And someone said, you want to come down and do sort of run some drills, be kind of a ball boy for this rookie minicamp, which involved me basically like, catching passes from the quarterbacks as they got warmed up, standing as a dummy for various drills, and it kind of lit a flame that to me seemed like my football destiny. And so a couple of summers later, I started going in every summer with the Patriots, and alongside friend of the program, Steve Belichick, who him and I are the same age, and he's got slightly better football credentials than I do. But oftentimes, if you saw a Patriots training camp practice taking place, you'd see two very unathletic, relatively small statured individuals, at least relative to the compared to the NFL population, running around as sort of ball boys slash, I would say like just basically like human traffic cones for drills. And so that was the start of it. And I did that for, as you mentioned, 4 total summers. And then I had a bridge summer. My last summer before I graduated from college, I took a more traditional internship down in Washington, D.C., which was fun but different. And the rationale behind that was just make sure that you haven't pigeonholed yourself too much before you've graduated from college and set yourself up to only have one destiny in the real world. And that led to me being hired with the Chiefs. And the way I got hired with the Chiefs is that Scott Pioli was part of the Patriots organization for many, many years, to great success, NFL Executive of the Decade, I believe a 3-time Super Bowl champion with the Patriots. And him and I developed a stronger and stronger bond over those years. And he gave me a chance and in that post-college world. So I went to Kansas City. When I got on the plane, I thought I was going to Kansas, not realizing I was moving to Missouri. And my first job out of college was an operations intern up in River Falls, Wisconsin, which is a teeny tiny town that used to host Chiefs training camp. And it was one of the most pleasant communities that you will ever meet. You paid pennies in the parking meters. I think they still have parking meters there, which
Wow.
most places it's all app driven now. The town's claim to fame beyond hosting Chiefs training camp was there was one restaurant that Joe Montana, during his tenure with the Chiefs, believed had a legendary pizza. And so it became the place that Joe Montana had given his stamp of approval. So business was always robust at that restaurant. And that was the start of my football journey.
Okay. Right back to New England quickly.
Much time as you
I get
need.
it. You're it's a summer, but are you ever in the building with Bill or Tom? Are they ever saying, "What is this high schooler
Yeah,
doing walking down the same hallway?"
yeah. Funny. So I feel like when you talk about either Brady or Belichick, and you do so in like a particularly favorable light, I think that people just basically chalk it up to like this is the prototypical brown nosing, like just trying to curry favor. Um, I did spend a lot of time inside the building, yeah, and basically every like there are photos. I used to spend every home game going with the team during like winter break in college, which at least at the college that I went to was often 5 weeks. I would kind of resume the internship. Um, I am going to sound probably a little nerdy, probably a little cliche here, but I think it's the truth, and I do think that the secret sauce is maybe much more visible than people realize. But both Brady and Belichick were the most singularly focused people that I've ever been around. I remember Wes Welker once said this about Brady publicly, not to me, that every decision that Tom Brady made in his life was dedicated towards becoming a better football player and staying in the NFL at a high level for as long as possible. And it really resonated. And the same thing with Bill Belichick. I have never been around a more consistent person in my life. And I think that has had a tremendous impact on players at the highest levels. I think it also had a massive impact on guys who were fringe roster players that either became something great or were not able to hold up that standard of consistency and were out of the building. And I learned a lot about that. Not that I was ever going to be an NFL player or anything close to it, but that consistency and that singular focus from each of them, I think, is something that is applicable in whatever you might do. In my case, it's talking about football now.
That's great. C. Long says they were both sons of bitches, which doesn't quite track with what you're
Yeah.
saying. But
Have we ever talked about this? Like,
people
can we
have
do an
different
aside here?
experiences.
And maybe
Please.
you're too close to it to see it this way. I was thinking about this though. Do you think C. Long is the most universally well liked teammate in team sports?
History?
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. Let's call it 10 years, 15 years. You can assign an era if you want. But I was thinking about it like he feels like the most relatable teammate that I can think of who everybody just loved. Like there are definitely gregarious, fun-loving characters that I think a lot of players loved. But I feel like even fans that didn't root for the Rams or the Patriots or the Eagles still loved them.
Yeah. I think he's in that
Mm,
conversation. And it probably because he's so freaking
mm,
genuine. I mean, he's nice and smart and
yeah,
funny and humble, but he's really an authentic guy. I remember when he was starting this, he said to a reporter, I don't really care about the following. I'm going to walk this way and see if anybody walks behind
yeah,
me. So he's never putting on for anybody, and while he really contributed in a big way to those Pats and Eagles teams, I'm sure the front office was like, get this guy in our locker room. Yeah, that would be a positive.
yeah,
That would be a good
yeah.
thing. And he has a 7 million friends. He doesn't really know a stranger. He's one of those types. And if you roll up on him and say, "Hey, can I get a picture and an autograph?" He's happy to oblige. He's one of those obnoxiously kind
Mm,
people. So yeah, that's a fair point. I don't think it's too different uh, than Field Yates uh, in that Simmons and Rosillo were talking the other day about people in media who nobody hates, the Mike Breens of
Yeah.
the world. Does anybody dislike you?
I'm sure there are many. To my face, I'm trying to think of like public bad blood that I've had. I'm sure there are many. I would say that, but I don't know. I think I was raised a particular way, and you mentioned how C Long is one of those guys that he will always stand for an autograph, stand for a photo, or sign an autograph. I'll go back to my Kansas City days here for a second. So my first year with the Chiefs, 2010 draft, so 2009 into the 2010 draft, we had the fifth pick, and we took Eric Berry, legendary player at Tennessee. And in my role, which was absolutely like grinder is, I mean, I was as low on the totem pole as you could possibly be. And I'm not trying to be humble or anything when I say that. One of my jobs during the pre-draft process was we'd bring these players in for these they called them the pre-draft visits. Now you get 30 per team, and from start to finish, I would kind of be the chauffeur for the player. You pick the guy up at the airport, bring him to the hotel if it's the night before the visit, get him up in the morning, pick him up to go to the medical side, bring him into the building, and he talks to all the coaches and the scouts, and then you bring him back to the airport, whatever it might be. And I remember Eric Berry was the single most impressive young man that I'd ever been around, to the point that like I almost felt compelled to go to Scott Pioli and our GM, this is me, 22-year-old me who'd been scouting for like 5 minutes, say like, if we don't take this guy, it'll be an error. And I remember something, this is where I was getting at, is that Eric Berry talked about how he, one of his favorite players growing up, he went to a camp or was at a game or somewhere in a public setting where he tried to get an autograph from an NFL player, and the guy just breezed right past him. And he's like, I'll never, in my entire NFL career, ever let a kid have that same experience with me. And that resonated with me. This was the guy who was the king of Tennessee, had an amazing career. It wasn't the apex of volunteer football, but still, really good player. The guy that mattered the most in Knoxville for 3 years. And the NFL, he became, at one point, the highest paid safety ever, all-pro player for multiple years. And I've always felt like that's an important sort of credo to live by, is like, those who can really should. And I felt like Eric Berry was a good embodiment of that. So, I don't know, it feels weird to talk about yourself as a kind human, but if I would like to consider myself somebody who tries to follow some of the things that I just referenced.
When you're picking a kid up at the airport, are you getting out of an idling car with like a last name on a piece of paper? How do they know to come
Yeah,
to you?
yes. Well, the good news was that in Kansas City, there was one terminal at the time, small airport. And usually, obviously, I knew what the player looked like. But yes, I did have Chiefs garb head to toe. And if I needed a board that indicated, who I was or who I was looking for. And I will say this, like, maybe it's just the distance from those visits that has made them like a bit of a nostalgic experience for me. But I always remember like some of the players and like how they comported themselves and how I thought that might matter in the NFL. I wasn't right on all of them, but like I mentioned, Eric Berry was, I always thought he was like borderline presidential. And I mean that in a very positive way with the way that he carried himself. Showed up in a suit, like that, like looked like he was ready to go for a Fortune 500 interview as opposed to a football visit, and treated every person, even a slappy like me, as somebody who had thought, somebody who was important. And there, Russell Okung, who just recently retired, has had an incredible post-career transition. Like, I remember thinking to myself, he's a damn good football player, but like this guy's got a whole lot more to offer than just football. Like, I wonder what it will be like for him beyond the field, because he was one of the smartest guys I'd ever spent time with. And I thought those were cool. Like, those guys, in most instances, thought nothing of me being around them for 24 hours. And 24 hours is far from enough to figure out everything you need to know about an athlete. But if you are a believer in first impressions at all, and I do think there's some serious value in them, those visits were like actually pretty formidable experiences, in my opinion.
Last chauffeur question. Does everybody get in the front seat of the car, or did some guys get in the back
Most of
seat?
them got in the back seat. And some of them, like when they got, and this is their prerogative, it's not like they owed me anything, but there were some guys that got in the back seat, headphones on, see you at the hotel. And like, does it matter? No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that they can't play football at an extremely high level. But it was always kind of like, we're not going that far. I'm not, it's not like a 2 hour drive where you've got time to take a nap. If you want to make small talk for 15 minutes, that would be fun. But, I'm sure hopefully there are some young scouts out there that are listening to this episode that can relate to this exact dynamic. Because every team is different, though, in the way in which they have these players traveling. Like some teams, no matter what caliber of the player, limo, picking them up at the airport, somebody, a car service unaffiliated with the team, and there are other teams. And at the time when I was in Kansas City, we were one of them where it was a guy in the scouting staff driving a Suburban was bringing these players to and from the various stops on the tour for the 24 or so hours that they were in town.
On the flip side, I was at the Final Four in Minneapolis in 2019, and we see Josh Pastner across the street. Then we see an Uber slowly roll up to pick up Josh Pastner, and we think nothing of it. Then Josh Pastner, he gets into the front seat of an Uber,
No.
which is some of the most questionable behavior I've ever witnessed. Now, I really like Josh Pastner because he's very nice to Coach Bennett when the Who's get him by 18 most times out. But that's perhaps the Eric Berry corollary is how we'll
There we
refer
go.
to it
Yeah. There
from
we
now
go.
on.
Love it.
Hey, Nick Sirianni, did he always have the goods?
So, it's so funny because I don't want to come across as thinking that like I had it all figured out. But I remember, so Nick Sirianni and it's actually really cool. I feel I'm so happy to see these guys succeed. But the first like young hires, meaning like first football job in the NFL in I'll call it class. I get to Kansas City, and Nick Sirianni had just been hired as the offensive quality control coach. Ryan Poles had just been hired as a scouting assistant, the same job that I got. He's now the Bears GM. Mike Borgonzi had also just been hired as a scouting assistant. He's now the Chiefs assistant GM. And when you see those like lists of future GMs in the NFL, he's always on it. There were others that were also hired, not like within a few other months. Brant Tillis, who's now oversees the Chiefs cap job, is interviewed for GM jobs as well. Ryan, not like all these guys that are all part of the same class that are doing huge things. But what I remember most about Nick was that football coaching is a completely unrelenting position. The hours are truly brutal, and I'm not trying to mitigate the work that other people do in different fields, but it's one of the most brutal life setups that you could have just from a pure hour standpoint. I always say that half the teams in the NFL work 100 plus hours each week to lose, right? I mean, like if you're a wide receivers coach on the Packers and you grind 100 hours and you lose by 25 on Sunday against the Vikings, like you could have also not showed up to work and also lost by 25, right? But Nick was being grinded to the bone. And when you're the offensive quality control coach, in a lot of ways, you are an extension of the offensive coordinator. You're kind of like an appendage for the offensive coordinator. My first year in Kansas City, we had Chan Gailey on staff, the longtime NFL coach, head coach, coordinator, and he was retained by Todd Haley, who was hired as the head coach. And then, so basically for the first like 6-7 months that Nick was there, he was Chan's right-hand man. And then Chan was relieved of his duties. I can't remember. It was like August 15th. It was like the middle of training camp, which never happens, right? I mean, that happens extremely infrequently in the NFL. So all of a sudden he becomes Todd Haley, who took over as the offensive coordinator, his right-hand man. And, the head coach has a lot more to do besides just coordinate one side of the ball. Following year, we hire Charlie Weiss. He becomes his right-hand man. And I get it. Like, being a right-hand man is a pretty typical job description for somebody. But every head coach, every coordinator is such a different way of like going about their business. Charlie Weiss was like everybody on the staff meets at like 5 a.m. Monday through Friday. And he was a morning guy. And it was like, we start this day exactly at this time. And Nick, like you're playing by like speaking a different language with each coordinator. And I just remember Nick had like this it was almost like freakish to me ability to just power through and like seem to be enjoying it, and um, had a relatability to the players that you could see. And I think probably some of that stemmed from the fact that like he was a sick football player himself. Like he played at Mount Union, one of the best D3 programs, probably the best D3 program in the country. Was like a legitimately awesome receiver for them. So I think they had like a little bit of a swagger for him that I think was like made him more relatable to the players. Now, am I going to sit here and tell you that like anybody can tell you with absolute certainty that a 24, whatever he was, 25-year-old quality control coach is destined to become a head coach in the NFL that within 2 years was coaching the Super Bowl? I'm not that smart, but I remember thinking to myself, like, this guy has a lot of like the extremely special traits that are required to be a great coach, and I can't wait to follow his journey. And it's been so awesome to see him continue to rise through the ranks, like really organically. And I know I'm going to sound like I'm being just a trumpet for Nick in saying this, but like there were times where I was almost annoyed by how little Nick was willing to toot his own horn over the past 10 or 12 years. I kept telling him, I'm like, man, you have to understand this. Like, I'm not saying that coaches that get jobs are only hired because, they sort of advocate for themselves, but we're not dumb. Like, you and I both see it as football observers. Like, there are coaches who let the world know through the media just how good they are, right? And I felt like Nick took the opposite path, and he got rewarded because he eventually got that head coaching job. And I remember being so protective when he first got that job in Philly. And you're going to have every head coaching hire is going to have the people that are in favor and the detractors. I remember just being so like way too emotionally invested in what people were saying about the hire and just saying like, let this guy coach a game before you actually cast judgment on him. And here we are 2 years later, and I'm like, well, that was wasted energy because like his Q score is off the charts, right? Like he's an absolute. I mean, everybody loves him in Philly right now, and the team looks primed to be awesome for a long time.
Consistent grinder sounds like a common denominator with some of these guys.
And I know that sounds.
You leave
I didn't mean
Kansas City.
to cut you off there, but just I will say, like people are like, okay, great, like work hard and you've got it. I hear you. Like that's a thing that is pertinent and relevant in a lot of industries, but like football is an easy path to walk away from because when you're in that first day, like I made $22,000 my first year out of college, which I didn't have a lot of stuff. I didn't have kids. I didn't have some hefty mortgage or anything, right? But it's like, trust me, if someone offered me 80K to go work in finance, like a four-time raise would be pretty enticing, even if it was an entirely different path than I wanted to be on. The hours sucked. Like I missed, and we'll talk about sounds like we'll talk about my next steps after that, but like you just miss a lot of stuff at that early age. It's easy to walk away. Like you can go coach high school and make more money than being an entry-level coach in the NFL or entry-level scout in the NFL. So that dedication and determination, like it paid off in a major way. And it's easy to say like I've got the goods, but the attrition rate is extremely high amongst young coaches in the NFL.
But the team issued gear.
I've still got stuff. I've got a closet right
mean,
here that I think might be. I have it downstairs, but I've got a like some old school Chiefs gear that will one day be on eBay for a lot of money.
well, yeah, if you're checking in at 174, it'll probably be on eBay
That's a
sooner
good
rather
point.
than later. None of that stuff can be worn. How much do we owe to Mike Reiss for opening a door
The
in
best.
media?
I'm glad you asked that. What a pure human Mike Reiss is. Um, I tell people often like some of what goes into success in the world of sports media is just good luck and good fortune. And Mike Reiss was my good fortune. I often say, I did the very typical when I decided that I wanted to leave football. I did not know what I wanted to do next, and I'm not being insincere in saying that. I thought that I would be closer to home, which is I'm from Massachusetts, as we mentioned earlier. And truthfully, like the weight of, I remember like my 5-year high school reunion came and went, and I was like one of two guys in my entire class that didn't show up, and then first wedding came up, couldn't make it to a wedding for a friend because it was in football season, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, a lot of my buddies are in one of the major cities, Boston, New York, DC. they're meeting up for every month or every couple months, and to the point that it's like, yeah, we can just take you off the group thread so that we don't give you, we don't make you feel left out here.
Oh,
And it started.
sounds like a dream.
Yeah,
But
the
go
group
ahead.
text, and now, oh my God,
Vice
now it would
versa.
be.
Yeah.
But at the time, like, it felt like some big life moments were kind of passing me by. But I did the typical send your resume to a million different places. And like, I don't keep I'm pretty good about organizing the Gmail. I never will be caught with, like, 8,000 unread emails. But there are some that stay in there forever. And the response back that I got from Mike Reiss was one that will never go away, because for some reason, after I wanted to follow in your footsteps and get a real estate license, I decided to go back into the world of
Mhm.
football somehow. And Mike Reiss, I started a blog. This is very 2012 of me. It was on Tumblr frequently, a little bit of tweeting here and there as well, some Facebook links. I think I might have had some LinkedIn action as well. And Mike Reiss was one of very, very few people to even acknowledge my email. And his response was so sincere and genuine. And he was the one that followed up with me after that initial correspondence. I assumed when he said, hey, he reached back out to me initially in the middle of the football season. He covers the Patriots for those unacquainted. And he said, hey, let's talk again during the offseason once the dust settles. Patriots ended up going to the Super Bowl, so it was a long season, and I sort of figured maybe we get a month out, maybe more, and I'll reach back out to him. I feel like 3 days after the football season was over, Mike sent me an email to check in on me, and it was my, sort of metaphorical lifeline. And we talk, if not every day, probably 5 times a week, probably on the phone at least once or twice a week. And it's often about football. But what's been really rewarding is that over the past couple of years, it's been about fatherhood. And I don't mean to sound like a sap, but you and I joked over text. We could probably do the entire show today just on being a dad. And I'm not sure too many people have influenced me as a dad in quite the way that Mike Reiss has.
And now, some years later, you have essentially every job at ESPN, at least NFL related. What's the most difficult of all these gigs? We see you on TV most days. Okay, two-parter. What's the most
Yeah.
difficult job? Tell us about your day to day,
Yeah.
for instance.
Um, all right. So today we're doing this Thursday, July 13th. So we had so right now I am filling in for Laura Rutledge as the host of NFL Live because she is on maternity leave. Her son and my daughter, we have already Laura and her husband Josh are very good friends of my wife and I. So we spend a lot of time with them with our older daughters, and we can't wait to spend a bunch of time with them with our younger children too, more so than we have already. But she's on maternity leave, I think, until closer to the football season. So I'm filling in for her on NFL Live. But today we're taping a show that'll air, I believe, Sunday, July 23rd. It's a Madden ratings special show. And so we had three different player interviews, one former, two current player interviews. And as is often the case with podcast guests, you're very much bending to their schedule, right? So today I left the house, got a fresh cut of the lawn before I left. So that was very important. Had to get the lawn cut. This time of the year, let it grow a little
Good.
bit longer than normal. Things dry out quickly, but had to get a good fresh lawn cut this morning. That's my therapy for 30 minutes. Get to the office.
Ooh, some lawn.
It's just got a couple of weird corners that you kind of go around a few
Okay.
times. I can do it efficiently in like 15 or 18 minutes, but I take my time on a couple of those. Get to the office. We did an interview with Chad Ochocinco Johnson, did an interview with Josh Allen, interview with Sauce Gardner, each of those different windows. And then we also taped the show. Taping a TV show, always takes longer than the allotted time of the show when it airs live. So a 1 hour show, for some reason, takes an hour and a half every time. And then once we wrapped up with that, turned right back to NFL Live mode. So that prep is kind of all morning, a little bit less so this time of the year because there's so little news. But we kind of get the show rundown in there. We have a couple of production meetings, including one with the analysts on the show that day, and then we hit the air at 4 p.m. for 4 to 5 So in the office until 5, and then I live about 20 minutes from ESPN studio, and so here we are talking shop. But yeah, I would say the hardest part of the job, I'd say for me, um, I think that there's a lot of benefit to wearing several different hats, and I take a lot of pride in having different responsibilities. There are times though that sometimes I wonder, am I like are there times where certain hats that I wear, I'm not pulling my weight enough, right? Am I if I'm hosting NFL Live, am I does that mean that I need to be more intentional with my fantasy football prep as the football season's coming around the corner, or in the middle of fantasy football season, am I not mindful enough of the upcoming NFL draft? I've had the great pleasure of working with Mel Kiper and Todd McShay, and love Todd. I know he'll land on his feet soon on the First Draft podcast, but that's a 365 day a year job for them, that draft stuff. So it's always like, am I giving enough to everything? Because I do feel like every sector probably deserves my full attention, and um, does it come at a cost? Is the draft coverage or the fantasy coverage not as good if you're too focused in on something else that you're doing?
Well, and then you have somebody ask you to do a podcast for 30 minutes, and now here we are at minute
I would do
45.
this.
And
No, hey, I will do this until you had to make the decision 64 East or West. Like, I know that this is more of an effort for you than me, so I'll be here until I don't know. Is there does like does this Riverside have like a programming limit? Like, are we only afforded a certain number of minutes? I'll keep going.
hours, 6 hours, 6 hours.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, we'll
Yeah,
be here until midnight, a little
yeah,
after.
we'll be fine. Um, do you ever find it challenging, I guess, especially in the fantasy realm, to repackage, recycle content, or is it the exact opposite? Today, we're mock drafting running backs.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, we're mock drafting running backs you may not have thought of.
Yeah. Um,
Thursday, it'll be receivers.
I'd say the trickiest part of fantasy football to me is that um, we joke about there's a lot of podcasts in general. There are a lot of fantasy football podcasts and a lot of fantasy football websites. A lot of people that use Twitter exclusively for fantasy football content. While once the season begins, things move and get shuffled around. Going into the season, there are a lot of things that basically any reasonable fantasy analyst agrees on, right? Like, there's not too many lists where someone's top 5 quarterback rankings include, like, yeah, I've got Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins, Bryce Young, and somebody else as the top 5 fantasy quarterbacks, or 2 other guys. Most people are in some order attached to the names like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields and Lamar Jackson, as an example. So I think what's tricky is that it's not that my takes that I might have on my show are decidedly different every single segment of every single show than the takes that you or anybody else with a fantasy football opinion has.
You're
It's
just
that,
more handsome.
oh gosh, make me blush. It's just that you hope that you can deliver it more in a more entertaining fashion, right? A fashion that I think people gravitate back towards. And I think, as I think about where this industry is going, I don't want to sound like, too philosophical right now, but I think something that you guys, and I'm not blowing smoke and saying this, but something that you guys have achieved to an extremely high level is that obviously there are things that the sports calendar naturally dictates we discuss. We're in the slow period right now. Like, if you guys woke up tomorrow and you decided you wanted to do a 2-hour episode on like the process of renovating a bathroom in your home, you'd probably find a way to make it interesting. It's not interesting, but you guys will find a way, right? Like, you're relatable. I want to hear your thoughts about sports, but like, I'm just as compelled by Making the Dad, or hey, your real estate endeavors, or your thoughts on t-shirts with pockets as opposed to t-shirts without pockets, right? Like, anything.
Mm.
That's, to me, that is part of the secret sauce of even fantasy football coverage. Is I hope that when people listen to our show, it's you want good, solid fantasy football advice, but you want to feel like for an hour or however long the episode is that you're kind of, it's like a suspension of reality for a little bit where you get your mind off of stuff and you get to hear things that you either agree or disagree upon. And if we deviate off of Justin Jefferson is awesome to a 5 minute discussion on whether when the plane lands, it's appropriate to stand up or if you should just wait until your aisle is actually deplaning, that you're not going to say, shut the hell up and get back to Justin Jefferson. But instead, you're going to say, dude, I totally agree. Like, it is so annoying when everybody stands up the second the plan lanes, and then we all stand there for 12 minutes and don't move an inch. So I kind of feel like that's like as much as every podcast kind of has a hook tied to the topic, I think it's the people that make the podcast. I really have started to feel like that more and more and more.
And you're one of the best. You sincerely are. We'll get you out of here with a little bit of fantasy content for the audience.
Let's do it.
You don't need to pull out any rankings, just general ADP in your head. Are you higher or lower on these? We'll call it three names. I got
Okay.
three great names for you.
Alrighty.
First one is Calvin Ridley.
I am a little bit lower probably than where he'll end up being drafted. I'm not trying to fence it here. I would just note that I'm always amazed when we go to the ADP data on ESPN. Big names get drafted way higher than sort of fantasy nerds would draft them. Like Patrick Mahomes will always be like one of the 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 highest drafted players, even though in every league that I play in, he'll last, a little bit longer than that, right? I think Ridley will end up being drafted higher because it's kind of the shiny object syndrome. Love the player, love the story. I'm probably a little bit lower. And if I had to sort of like state the concern, it would be just that the Jaguars had like this perfectly balanced offense last year, and everybody that was on that offense is back. So I don't know if Calvin Ridley like definitely is the number one wide receiver in Jacksonville this year. Christian Kirk could very easily be that, and Calvin Ridley could very easily be the 2 or even like the 2/3 because Zay Jones was really good as well last season. I have him like around wide receiver 28, I think, in my most recent rankings.
Yeah, there's that and the gambling addiction. So you don't know if he'll
Hopefully that's
be
a thing of the
available
past.
all season.
Yeah.
Tight end, New York Giants, Darren Waller. Is he on the back end of things here, or is he still a stud?
I think he is. I think he is in a really sweet spot right now for where things go this season because first of all, I don't want to sound like a therapist, but it's good when family business is good, right? It did not. Him and Josh McDaniels clearly didn't seem to see eye to eye, so it's good that he's in a place where he feels valued and feels motivated. He plays a position where we are desperate for players, and he is, at least in my estimation, clearly the most talented Giants pass catcher. So I think he's due for a season much more in line with where he was prior to like the past season and a half. And at tight end, we are not just looking for volume, but like just big playability and red zone aptitude really matter. Waller last year, even in the tiny sample size, second amongst all tight ends in yards per catch. Like he's one of the freakiest athletes in all of sports. If he's healthy, and it sounds like he is, in a good space, he should have a really good season.
Third and final name, Rhamondre Stevenson. Are you higher or lower than average ADP for
Right
the
on the
Pats run?
button. Yeah, I'm probably right on the
Okay.
button here for Rhamondre. And just feels like it'd be tough for Rhamondre to really fail this season, absent health, which is a caveat for every player. But even if his receiving goes down, he actually was third amongst running backs in catches last year. Only Christian McCaffrey and Austin Eckler were behind him. But even if that number drops, which is reasonable to expect because the Patriots will have a more high functioning offense this year and have a lot of pass catchers, even if not a star pass catcher yet. That number could drop, but the rushing feels so stable because the backfield depth behind him is, the NFL has shown us you can find running back kind of out of nowhere, but it's still like a pretty small sample size of like NFL evidence for like Pierre Strong and Kevin Harris behind him. So just feels like he's due for a very, very good role. And he is super talented. Like, take away just like just the number of opportunities. Like, you watch him on a play-by-play basis, and I think the Patriots were one of the least watchable offenses that I can recall in a long time last year. But Rhamondre Stevenson, when he had the ball, made it worth my time.
Okay, last fantasy question. A guy who has never ended up on one of your squads, but your favorite guy who has never landed on one of your squads. Mine, his name's Amon-Ra St. Brown. I can never get him. I love him, and he performs.
Yeah, he does. He's also it's because I play in so many leagues, and it's sort of, I call it market research, right? You kind of have to. I have had a lot of exposure to players, but guys that I feel like I've been underexposed to in my most recent years. It's like you're invariably going to have the Cooper Kupps and the Jeffersons and the whatever the star running backs, the Ecklers and the McCaffreys. He's young; it's only his third year, but I haven't, and I know it's a small run of this, but I haven't had the Justin Fields experience yet, and I'm looking forward to that one just because even if they run him a lot less this year, which with a much better group of pass catchers they probably will. He's lightning in a bottle, man, and he is, I don't want to be hyperbolic, but one of the best athletes that we've ever seen at the quarterback position. And I think that sometimes when teams say they're going to run a quarterback a lot less, it sounds good in May and June, but when wins and losses are on the line, I think it feels a lot different. And we've seen this out of Buffalo in the past. Josh Allen's going to run the ball less, and then he runs the ball more. That could be the case with Justin Fields. Like, it may not be quite as many carries, but he still could have, 110 attempts next year, and it wouldn't surprise me a bit.
Field, you're the man. I only got to half this stuff.
Dang!
So
well, we still have
to,
half more hours.
We're going to have you back on, and especially when the big guy gets back from Montana. I ask this with respect as someone who has an unconventional name. Field Minister Yates.
Oh, yeah.
Were your parents filling out a Mad Lib where they just needed two nouns when you were born?
Yeah, so Minister is the easy part. It's my mother's maiden name.
That's what Macon is for me, Field.
Yeah. Oh, is that okay? There you go. And then Field, my mom is, I think my mom would admit that she was more influential in the decisions I'm one of three. My sister is caddy, like a golf caddy. My brother's Taylor, which I suppose is like a little unique, but it feels very, very mainstream compared to the rest of the other two. But my mom was adamant that she wanted to have very unique names. And Field had been like a middle name before, and I think it had been a two-part name before, but she was adamant that she wanted Field as a name at some point in her however many children she had. And it's tied quite nicely with the career that I have. I'll admit, though, and I don't know if you felt the same way, like growing up, like it was a little bit, I didn't have like, super scarring experiences, but it was a little tough every once in a while when like, kids poke fun at your name. And it's like, I had zero authority in the matter here. Recall that like my name was Field, not because I had any inclination to have that as my name. It was because I was assigned this. But I'm feel very fortunate now because it is fun with what I do. So Field Minister Yates. If anybody sounds preppier, let me know.
I'm giving you a run for your money.
We are.
Making bacon for the first 16 years of my life, but it's okay. It's worked out.
I love it. Totally.
Field, thank you. Keep showing up on our TVs every day. We'll keep watching.
I'll do my best.
Thank you, man.
That sounds good. Hey, an early congrats, by the way. I know that I think having 2 kids is a lot. Having 3 kids, my friend, I know you guys will navigate it well, but best of luck to you. That'll be a lot of fun.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Listen to the full podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast streaming platforms. Wherever you want to get the podcast, you can get the podcast. Pretty simple. New episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Podcasts get pretty wild. This is real tame.